Hello! This tutorial will explain you how to create your log frame in WebMo and how to add different indicator types and data. If you don't know WebMo and you did not watch the Getting Started video, we would recommend that you first watch that video, as this tutorial will jump straight away into the details of the log frames and indicators. To watch the Getting Started video, simply follow the link mentioned in the description of this video. Okay, so in order to create your log frame, first thing is to click on the Logframe tab, and here you can create or update your log frame. If you're starting a new project, then this area will be empty, but in this case it has been filled out for explanation purposes. So the first thing that you want to do is add an objective indicator by clicking this button, or you could also start by creating an outcome. On all these elements, objective, outcome, and output, you can add indicators to them. So let's create an indicator. For example, we could start by clicking on Add Objective Indicator. A new window will open up and you can fill in the data about your indicator. The first field is a short name. A short name is like a nickname for this indicator. Sometimes the full indicator description is just too long for some overview pages and tables. That's why a short name is useful to keep things simple and concise. So let's enter a name, for example, gender indicator test. A reference ID is an identifier. Is a number or a character, alphanumeric characters that are used for sorting the indicators in the exact order that you want. You could start by adding, for example, 1 or 2 or 3. In this case, I will add 5 since I believe there's already 4 indicators added. But it could be also letters. And this is useful so that you can sort them exactly in the order that you want. Otherwise, the system will sort them by their latest date or alphabetically. Then we have the description about the indicator, and here you can enter all the as many text as you want. You could select a responsible person for this indicator and fill out the progress details such as deadline and the type of indicator that you want: baseline, target, current value, which is more quantitative, or milestone indicator, which is more qualitative. I will get back to this in a minute. And by the way, all the fields marked with a red asterisk are mandatory. The current progress description, you can enter the text as to how the progress is evolving. If there is an upcoming measurement date, or if there is also a measurement interval, if it's monthly, bi-monthly, etc. And of course, where the data is coming from. You have to describe the source of verification. And if there are risks and assumptions for this indicator. Sometimes this is also called challenges. If there's a need for action, yes, no, or if you are unsure, simply mark unsure. If there is a need for action, please describe the action to be taken. And at the very bottom, there's a notes section where you could add further information about this indicator. And a word like editor will open up where you can give format to your font, add links, bullet points and lists, tables, media, etc. Okay, so let's go back to the type of indicator. So what is the baseline, target, and current value indicator type, and how does it work? Well, with the baseline, target, and current value indicator is more quantitative indicator type, and you can enter a a baseline value, and of course the current value. So we will select the first one. New fields will open up, such as the entity. Let's say number. Well, this would be the simplest case if you want to have a number, and if you do not want to disaggregate the classes, you can just enter a baseline, for example 0, and the target 100%. So as I said, this would be the simplest case, but you can also enter disaggregated data as well. In WebMo, you can disaggregate by whatever you want, for example gender, age group, region, etc. So you can define as many classes as you want. So let's go and select yes, that we want to disaggregate, and let's call this age, and fill in classes, for example people younger than 14 years old with a baseline of 0 and a target of maybe 50. A class for people between the ages of 14 and 30, baseline of 0 and perhaps a target of 60, and maybe another class of people older than 30 years, baseline of 0, target of 80. And yes, we can save this page. Okay, so once you have created the indicator page, it will appear under the level that you entered it from. In this case, it was the objective indicator level, and we created indicator number 5. So to add data, we want to click on the indicator page. And now we scroll down to where it says progress details, and we can see now the classes and the baselines and target values that we had entered. The total values at the bottom is the sum of their values. So in this case, well, first one is 0. Target would be the sum of all these numbers, which is 190. And we have not entered yet a current value. That's why it's not available, and it's a 0 by default. So in order to enter a current value, we click on Add Dataset. Now we select the date, for example today, and we establish the current value of the first class, people younger than 14. So let's say if our target was, I believe it was 50, then we can enter maybe 35. For the second class, I believe the target was 60, so we can enter maybe 45, and for the last one it was I think it was 80, so we can enter maybe 55, for example, and then we click on Save. So now, as you can see, we have created our data sets for this indicator, and the total values are the sum of the values that we entered. So in this case it's 135. One thing to keep in mind is that it is not possible to modify the classes anymore. It's possible to add new datasets or to modify the current values, but it's not possible to modify or delete these classes, because from a monitoring point of view, it doesn't make sense to modify already entered values. It makes more sense to create new datasets or new indicators, or simply modify current values but not the already established values. And that's why we have configured the system in this way. Okay, so if we go back to the indicator sheet through this breadcrumb link, we can see now the progress of our indicator, which is 71%, and this was calculated once we entered the current value. So that is how you enter a quantitative example of an indicator type, which is of baseline, target, and current value. Okay, so now we will describe the second type of indicator, which is called milestones indicator. In this example, we want to enter a more qualitative indicator where the progress is defined in certain steps or milestones. So if you need to measure some milestones or steps in achieving your targets, then you can use the milestones indicator. And so let's go back to our Logframe. And let's click on Add New Objective Indicator right at the top. And fill in the form just as we did with the previous indicator. We can call this indicator Law Indicator, and we give it a reference ID of number 6. Description, we assign a responsible person. A deadline for this would be perhaps, let's say, March. And milestone indicator. Since we're talking about the implementation of a law, then the baseline would be that there's no law yet, so no law exists, and that's today, right? There's no law as of now in this example. And our target would be well, that the law is implemented, right? And now we add milestones in between. So the first one would be perhaps that there's a working group established to discuss this new law. And let's make it simple and go at 30% steps. Target date, perhaps the first week of February, and let's say that we achieved it already from the 1st of February. And then the second milestone, maybe we give it 60%, and a draft law is available. Target date would be second week of February, and maybe we achieved it in the just before that, the beginning of that week. And then a third milestone, maybe 90%, and the group agrees on the new law. Target date would be perhaps last week of February, and well, we have not achieved it yet, and therefore also not the target yet. So by default, when saving this indicator page, the progress will be based on the latest date achieved. So in this case, it will be 60%, because we set a target date for the 14th of February, and we achieved it already on the 10th of February. The other two milestones have not yet been achieved, and therefore the progress will be 60%. It will always take the latest date achieved. We fill out the rest of the information, and then when we're ready, we click on Save. And now we can add an outcome. So we scroll down to where it says Outcome, and we can add as many as we want. We click on this button, and it's a very similar form to the indicator form, so it's quite straightforward. Just enter the short name, reference ID, start and end date of the outcome, the description, a responsible person, if there are any risks or challenges, need for action, and your notes. And that's all there is to it. I'm not going to create a new one in this case, since we already have an example here. So pasture management, it looks like this. We have a description, etc. So you could also add supporting documents to the outcome, and add indicators to it, either from the outcome page, or if we go back to the log frame, we could also add it from the overview table, which is here. It's the same indicator, less littering. So if we go to the pasture management page, we can see it there. So they are linked. It's the same. So to simplify, if you want to do it directly from the outcome page or from the log frame. So that's how you add an outcome and indicators to outcomes. Then you could also add outputs to this outcome. And to do so, you click on this button, Add Output, and the process is the same. A new window or tab will open, and you simply fill in the form. It's very similar to the outcome, except that, well, this one belongs to the outcome. But pretty much the information is the same, as you can see. Again, I'm not going to create a new one since we already have an example. So let's assume that we just created this output that's called farmer training, and as you can see, this is how it looks like. Pretty similar to the outcome, except that it's at a different level. And just as with the outcome, you can add supporting documents and also indicators to the output directly from the output page or from the log frame. It's the same, Sustainable Farmers Curriculum. It's just linked. On the output level, you can add activity indicators where you can attach activities to an indicator. So we know that this is done in practice, but usually you should do activities to achieve outputs and outcomes, and the indicator will measure the progress from a neutral position. But, well, yes, sometimes it makes sense on the output level to assign activities to an indicator that, for example, counts the number of, let's say, conducted trainings. So if we want to add an activities indicator, we go to an output, and here we can add the indicator. So if we click on Add Output Indicator, we scroll down, well, we give it a name. So for example, activity, well, we were talking about training, so training number 1, reference ID maybe, I don't know, 1A, description, responsible person, deadline. And here, as you can see, a third kind of indicator called activities indicator is enabled. This is specifically and just for output, for the output level. In the outcome level or in any other level, this kind of indicator will not appear. By default, we can only add the baseline, usually, well, 0, and then the target and current values will be calculated automatically. This means that if at the moment I'm entering 1 activity, then my target is 1, and the current value is whatever progress I added to that activity. If I add a second activity, then the target is 2. So the progress will be calculated depending on how many targets I have and how many current activities I have ongoing or completed. So we fill out the rest of the form, and we save the page. All right, so as you can see, we have the activity indicator here. So let's click on it and add a current value to it. At the moment, we have no values, So we click on add activity. So now we create an activity for this indicator, and let's call it training for men, reference ID maybe 1B or something like this. The status, well, it's ongoing. We give it a start date and an end date. Progress perhaps 50%. We give it a description, responsible person, and by default it already says that it belongs to this indicator, training training number 1. We fill out the rest of the form, and then we click on save. So now if it leads us back to the output indicator. If we scroll down, we can see that it's the progress of this indicator is 0% because the activity is ongoing. So now remember how it was previously, these values were all 0. Now the target is 1 because we have added 1 activity. So that is our target. At the moment there's 1. So this will always be calculated automatically depending on how many activities you have added. The current progress says 0, and the progress is also 0% because this is an ongoing activity. So once we complete the activity, this will change to 100%. Of course, it depends on actually how many activities you have. The more you have, well, if we add a second and a third one, then we have a target of 3, and the progress will be based according to the ones that you achieved. So if we go back to our activity and modify the progress, let's say that we actually finished this training, we click on edit, and then we scroll down to the progress area, and then we say it actually doesn't matter if it's 50 or 100%, as long as it's completed. So, but let's go ahead and select 100%, and what will change the status and the progress in the output in the activity level is selecting completed. So we click on save, and now as we can see, the progress is now 100% in the activity. So if we go back to our indicator, which is a training 1, the indicator also changed now to 100% because the activity was indeed completed. Previously, here in the status it said ongoing, and the current value was 0. Now it's 1 because this is 1 activity completed, and since there's only 1 activity listed here, the system calculates it as 1 target. The target is 1, and it will always be, the target will always be the number of activities that we add. So this is how we create an activity indicator. And if we go back to our Logframe and we scroll down to where this indicator was added, which is the output here, farmer training. Remember that this is a training 1 that we just created. It's completed because its activity, training for men, is also completed. So as you can see, we can connect activities to indicators in 2 different ways. Either you go back to the activity indicator and create a new activity which will be connected to the indicator and therefore the respective output. So if we go back to training for men, and we click on edit, then we can connect it to the indicator 1A training or not. It could also be independent if you don't want to connect it to that indicator. So that's one way to do it. The second is to either add a new activity or an existing activity and connect it to that indicator. So for example, if we want to create a new one, we fill out the form and then we select the indicator it belongs to. Right, so that is how you add outcomes, outputs, activity indicators, and activities to your Logframe. Stay tuned for the next tutorial. Thank you for watching.